What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this week's edition of the Walgreens COVID-19 Positivity Index, where we take a look at the various positivity levels from Walgreens. As of last week, they started doing weekly updates on Monday, and they just did an update for today. So I thought we would go over the data. Hopefully everyone is staying safe. Hopefully you are not one of the 7,210 people that took a test at Walgreens. And if you are, hopefully you have tested negative. Now there's a few things we want to disclaimer first. The colors on the map are not always going to be accurate. We learned that last week. Some states that showed rising positivity were dropping, some that showed dropping were rising, and any state that's in white, you can see Wyoming, New Hampshire's another one. I go to click on it. We're not going to get data from those states. Those states have incomplete data, so we cannot click on them. Now, we're not going to look at every state, but we're going to look at a good number of states. We'll start with the national positivity, which is 25.4%. Prior week is 24.4%. That's a difference of up 1%, but testing is down. 7,210 this week versus 8,250 in the previous report. And you're going to see some states where testing is only down ever so slightly, but the positivity is way up. In my definition, that's a legitimate rise, meaning your cases are likely rising. And you're going to see other states where testing is just way down, and that's why your positivity is up. Or you're going to see where the positivity is dropping, and testing has dropped at the same time. That means your state's probably not doing all that bad, at least not according to Walgreens. So let's start off with Maine. And Maine is one of those wonky states as of lately where it has this up-down regimen. In other words, we can't get a clear trend out of Maine. Current week, 38.9% positivity. The prior week was 5.9%, 33% difference, but it sees these massive swings from week to week now. Current week testing, 18 versus 17. Vermont, we get an update. New Hampshire, I can't give you an update. It's white. I click on it, nothing's going to come up. Vermont, 18.2% this week. It was 25% last week. 6.8% drop. And if you remember, last week, I don't think we had any data out of Vermont on Walgreens. 11 tests this week, 12 the previous week. Let's go to a big one. And here's New York State. And I say big, but for as big of a state as New York is, I wish we saw more than 243 people getting tested. This number needs to be back over 1,000, but you know, it's expensive to get tested. The government's not paying for it anymore. Current week's positivity, 22.2%. Prior week, 21.5%. Difference of up, 0.7%. 243 tests this week, 237 the prior week. And yes, this is a legitimate rise for another reason. Their testing is actually up this week with the positivity, so that's something we're watching. Again, if you saw my wastewater video from Sunday, if you didn't, go watch it. It's 2 or 3 videos below this. The wastewater in New York City Metro, in some sites, is starting to rise. So this is another concerning factor that just came into play. Let's take a look at Connecticut. Connecticut's seeing a rise in positivity. Current week, 21.3%. Prior week, 10.7%. Difference of up 10.6%. 47 tests versus 56. So this is kind of a combination. You can't lay it all on the drop in testing. You probably also have a rise in cases because you're right next to New York City. And if it was down to say, let's just say 20 tests, yeah, then I would say, oh yes, it's definitely because there's less tests. But 11 tests, that's not all that big. How about Massachusetts? What's going on there? 13.3% this week, 20.3% last week. Down by 7%, and with testing down, that's a legitimate drop. Pennsylvania, 20.8% this week, 26.5% last week. A difference of down 5.6%, and there's an increase in testing. That's interesting to see that testing is up in my state. And my state of Pennsylvania, on the statewide level, did report more cases, so I'm concerned. We're probably still rising in Pennsylvania because that's a pretty big increase in testing for my state. New Jersey, what's going on here? We're seeing an increase in New Jersey as well. 22.4% this week, 14.3% last week. Difference of up 8.1%. That's concerning, and I think this is a legitimate rise. Here's why. 205 tests this week, 223 last week. That's not a major decrease in testing. And the positivity, look at the chart. It's going up relatively quickly. Let's take a look at Virginia. 20.9% this week, 19.4% last week. That's a difference of up 1.5%. And this is a legitimate rise. Current week's testing, 139. Previous week, 129. So that's concerning. North Carolina, 24.3% last week, 22.4% this week. Difference of up 1.9%, but testing is down significantly. 284 tests this week, 331 last week. So the positivity increase there is likely due to a drop in testing. How about Ohio? Ohio, 18.7% this week, 13.8% last week, up 4.9%, 150 tests this week, 196 last week. And we're going to say for this state, it's mostly because of the drop in testing. Indiana, what's going on here? 27.4% positivity this week, 22.1% last week, 5.3% increase in positivity this week. We'll say this is a legitimate rise. Here's why. 113 tests this week, 113 tests last week. It's flat, but positivity rose. So you're seeing a legitimate rise in Indiana. That's concerning. How about Illinois? We've been watching the Chicago metro area rise in wastewater. Here's the positivity. 29.6% this week, 28.1% last week. Difference of up 1.5%. But there is a pretty big decrease in testing. This one we're going with, it's because of testing. 675 tests this week versus 844 last week. How about Wisconsin? Wisconsin's showing a pretty big increase. 31% positivity this week, 22.2% last week. Difference of up 8.8%, but there's also a decrease in testing. 274 versus 315. We'll say it's partly because of rising cases, and the rest of it, it's probably testing related. How about Minnesota? Minnesota is 19.8% this week, 17.8% last week. Difference of 2.1% upward. 131 tests this week, 135 last week. We're going with this is going to be a rise in cases likely. And let's just continue over here to Nebraska. We don't always get a Nebraska update. 29.6% this week, 13.6% last week. Big increase. This is a 16% increase. 27 tests this week, 44 last week. We'll say it's mostly because of a drop in testing, but you may also have an increase in cases as well. Let's go down here to Kentucky. Kentucky, big drop. 14.4% this week, 32.8% last week. That's down by 18.3%. Total test, 97. And current week, or last week, was 116, so this is a legitimate drop. How about Georgia? What's going on there? Georgia, 21.6% this week, 23.6% last week. That's down by 2.1%. And testing was down as well, 232 versus 254. How about Florida? Florida, finally, testing has gone below 1,000. We knew that was going to happen. It's a red state, and I was shocked there were still over 1,000 people getting tested to begin with from Walgreens. 25.4% this week, 26.6% last week. It's a difference of down 1.2%, and testing is 994 this week versus 1,174 the previous week. So yes, it's probably somewhat flat to maybe dropping on cases. How about Alabama? Alabama is showing a big increase, and this is what we're going to call a legitimate rise. I know they're doing this up-down regimen, but let's take a look here. 36.1% this week, 8.3% last week, 27.8% increase. That's a massive increase with the same amount of testing. This is definitely a legitimate rise just because the testing is flat. So cases there are likely rising. How about in Louisiana? Louisiana, yes, legitimate rise as well. Let me explain. 20.3% this week, 16.7% last week, 3.6% increase, but look at testing. 74 tests this week, 66 the prior week. So if we continue with seeing more states where testing's going up, we may potentially see a increase on the national testing. The reason why we have not seen an increase on the national testing is states like Florida, which had a significant drop in the number of people getting tested. Let's take a look at Texas here. Texas, this is probably not a legitimate rise, and I'll explain why. 24.7% this week, 23.1% last week, 1.6% increase, 960 tests versus 1,176. So again, a state with a significant drop in testing. That's why your positivity's up. And again, this also helps keep the national testing down week over week, despite all these states we've seen so far with increases in testing. California is one of the most populated states. Only 322 people got tested. That's not good. Current week's positivity, 30.4%. Prior week, 28.1%. That's a difference of up 2.3%, 322 tests versus 366. It is possible your cases are starting to rise, because I thought I saw the state itself reported a rise in cases. I'll have to double check on that. Taking a look here at Washington, 20.3% versus 17.4%, 2.9% increase, 118 tests versus 138. It's probably a mixture of the testing being down and maybe a rise in cases. How about Nevada? Nevada, 31.3% versus 26.8%. Difference of up 4.5%. 128 tests versus 157. Most of this is probably based on the fact that your testing's down, and you might even be seeing a small increase in the number of cases. Alright, I really wanted to show Alaska here at the end. This is totally ridiculous. Alaska, 50% positivity. Prior week, 5.6%. Difference of up 44.4%. Now, yes, they are in this up-down regimen like we saw with Maine, but 14 tests versus 18 tests. Okay, they don't do a lot of testing, and it's only a 4-test decrease. So some of it, yes, it's definitely because they don't test enough, and some of it also is because you're probably seeing a rise in cases, and I don't think we did New Mexico. Let's just see New Mexico real quickly. 42.2% this week, 33.7% last week, difference of up 6.5%. Current week's testing, 107. Prior week was 104. And we'll go with yes, this is a legitimate rise because that's not a massive drop in testing. Alrighty, thanks for watching this week's Walgreens update. We'll have another Walgreens update again next Monday when they update. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe to my channel down below. I will see you all again tomorrow, but until I see you again tomorrow, stay safe, everyone.